My brother forged my signature on the loan documents, then told the bank I was the one who disappeared with the money. My family backed him up, every single one of them. They forgot I'm the one who set up their accounting software. The smell of birch coffee and recycled air is what I remember most about that night. I was sitting in the back office of my parents' dry cleaning business, the one I had been quietly managing the books for since I was 19, and my hands would not stop shaking. Not because I was cold, because I had just read the certified letter from Meridian Community Bank informing me that I, Paige Holloway, was $63,000 in default on a small business loan I had never applied for. I read it 3 times. Then I set it down very carefully on the desk, the way you set down a glass you're afraid you're going to throw. My brother Cody was 29 and had the financial discipline of a golden retriever who found a credit card. He was charming, loud, and the kind of guy who could talk a stranger into lending him $20 and somehow make the stranger feel grateful for the opportunity. Our parents had been propping him up since he dropped out of his business degree junior year. The restaurant venture that ate $40,000, the food truck that lasted 1 summer, the online reselling thing that my mother still couldn't explain but had funded anyway, and now, apparently, this. I drove to my parents' house instead of calling. I needed to see their faces. My mother was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. My father was in the living room watching a game with the volume too loud. Cody's truck was parked out front, which I had not expected, but probably should have. I laid the letter on the kitchen counter without saying anything. My mother looked at it. She looked at me. She picked up the dish she had been rinsing and kept rinsing it. "Mom, he forged my signature." She set the dish in the rack. She dried her hands on the towel looped through the oven handle. She did not look at me when she said it. "We know," she said. Those 2 words did something to my chest I still cannot fully describe. Not surprise, exactly. More like the sensation of a floor you thought was solid turning out to be just very convincing carpet over nothing. I walked into the living room. My father muted the game. Cody was on the couch, and he had the audacity to look almost apologetic, which was worse somehow than if he had looked smug. "Paige, just let us explain." My father started. "There is nothing to explain." He used my name, my credit, my social security number, on a loan I never signed for. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He had the same posture he used to use when he was about to tell me something I was not going to like, but he had already decided. He used it when he told me we couldn't afford my college visits. He used it when he told me the car they gave Cody was a necessity because his commute was longer. "The bank is already asking questions," he said. Cody explained that you 2 had a verbal agreement, that you were partners on the expansion, that you were supposed to be on the paperwork. I wasn't. I never agreed to anything. "We know that," my mother said from the doorway, "but the loan officer has your signature." And Cody's explanation is, it's simpler, it's cleaner. If this goes sideways, if the bank starts a formal fraud investigation, it doesn't just affect Cody. It affects the business. It affects the building. We use the building as collateral, Paige. I looked at her. I looked at my father. I looked at my father. I looked at Cody, who was studying the carpet. "You want me to say I agreed to it. We want you to not make it worse," my father said. "Just stay quiet. Let us manage it. Cody is going to start paying it back. We'll cover the minimum payments. By the time it's paid off, it'll just be a line on your credit history. You're young. You'll recover." "I'm 27, I said. "This would follow me for 7 years minimum. I couldn't buy a car. I couldn't rent an apartment without a cosigner. You could live here," my mother said, with the complete sincerity of someone who did not understand why that was not a solution. Cody finally looked up. "Look, Paige, I'm sorry. I genuinely thought you'd say yes if I asked. You always help out. I just needed to move fast and the loan window was closing and you thought I'd say yes, so you didn't ask. I want you to hear how that sounds." He had the grace to look away again. My father stood up. "Here is the reality. If you go to the bank, they open an investigation. The investigation looks at all the business accounts, not just the loan. You know how we run things. You know there are things in there that are flexible. If auditors get involved, this becomes something much larger than $63,000. You want to blow up the entire family over this? And there it was, not a threat exactly, more like a map of all the ways I could lose. I had been doing the books for that business since I was 19. Flexible was a very charitable word for some of what I had seen in those accounts. Cody's personal expenses running through the business. My father's gambling payments labeled as equipment rentals. Nothing that would land anyone in prison, but enough to make an audit genuinely ugly. They knew I knew. And they knew I had always stayed quiet because they were my family. I went home that night and sat in my apartment in the dark for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. Here is the thing about being the person who sets up the accounting software. You know where everything lives. I had installed the bookkeeping system for my parents' business 4 years ago. QuickBooks cloud-sensed with automated reporting enabled because my father could never remember to run month-end himself. I had configured it to send a summary report to 3 email addresses every first of the month. My father's, mine, and a read-only archive address I had created for backup purposes. That archive address was tied to an email account my father did not know existed. 4 years of monthly reports, 4 years of transactions, every equipment rental that was not equipment, every personal withdrawal coded as a business expense, every minimum payment on a loan I had not taken out. I also had something else. When I set up the system, I had enabled an audit log feature that most small business owners ignore because it sounds technical and unnecessary. Every change made to any entry, every deletion, every backdated correction was time-stamped and stored in a separate log that synced to the cloud independently of the main account. My father and Cody had made several adjustments to the loan-related entries over the past 3 months. Adjustments that showed very clearly that the original entries had listed Cody as the sole borrower and then, 9 weeks ago, had been changed to list me. I had not noticed because I had not been looking. I had trusted them. I stared at the audit log for a long time. Then I thought about what my father had said. You want to blow up the entire family over this. And I thought about the certified letter from the bank and Cody's truck in the driveway. And my mother rinsing a dish. I called my friend Simone, who was a paralegal and who I trusted more than anyone on the planet, and I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Send me the files tonight." I did. The next few weeks were the kind of quiet that precedes something. My parents called periodically to check that I was being cooperative, which was their way of checking that I was staying silent. Cody texted once to say he had made the first loan payment, as if that resolved the matter. I responded with a thumbs up because I did not trust myself to write words. I went to work. I came home. I did not go to the family dinners I was usually expected at on Sundays. My mother called on the 3rd Sunday. I told her I had a headache. She said, "You're not still upset about the thing with Cody, are you?" Not as a question, as a statement, with a very specific emphasis on still, as if my timeline for getting over being defrauded was already running long. I said no, I was fine and got off the phone. What I was actually doing was meeting with a woman named Deborah Winslow, who was a certified fraud examiner that Simone had connected me with. Deborah had reviewed the files. She had a lot of thoughts. The most important one was this: what Cody had done was bank fraud. Federal. The loan application included forged government identification documents, specifically a copy of my driver's license that I had never provided, and a forged signature on a federally insured loan instrument. This was not a family disagreement. This was a crime that carried up to 30 years. I had not been thinking about it in those terms. I had been thinking about my credit score. Deborah also pointed out something I had not fully processed. The audit log showing the backdated changes to the business accounts. That was potentially evidence of a cover-up attempt. If I had stayed quiet and the bank had eventually pursued the default, I would have been the one holding the liability. Cody's name had been systematically removed. I would like to tell you I made the decision easily. I did not. I sat with it for 2 more weeks. I called Simone at 11 on a Tuesday and cried in a way I hadn't since I was a kid. I drove past my parents' house 3 times one evening without stopping. I wrote and deleted a message to Cody so many times my phone auto-filled his name in the first line. Because here is the thing about family that nobody tells you when you're young. The love and the harm are not separate. They come in the same package. My mother made me soup when I had my tonsils out at 13. My father taught me to drive in an empty parking lot and was so patient about it that I still think about that afternoon sometimes. These things are also true. They exist alongside the other things. And you have to decide which pile is bigger. Not as an act of survival, calculation, but as an act of survival. The pile had gotten very big. I authorized Deborah to contact the bank's fraud department on my behalf. I want to be precise about what happened next, because this is the part that matters. The bank's fraud team opened an investigation. As part of that investigation, they requested the original loan application. The application included a copy of my driver's license. My actual driver's license had been issued in March of that year after I renewed it following a move. The license on the loan application was the old one, same number, expired, a version I had not possessed since March. Cody had photographed it without my knowledge at some point before it expired. More importantly, the loan application was submitted in early April. The signature on it was compared to my actual signature by a forensic document examiner. They do not match in 7 specific characteristics. The bank also requested the business account records. The audit log I had been maintaining for 4 years was subpoenaed. Every backdated entry, every reclassification, every edit Cody had made to shift the loan liability from his name to mine, time-stamped to the minute. My parents hired a lawyer immediately. His name was Mr. Farrow, and I had met him once at a Christmas party years ago, and he had a laugh that was too loud for every room. He called me through my father's phone one evening and explained, in very measured tones, that the family's position was that this had been a miscommunication, a clerical error, that Cody had genuinely believed I was a willing participant and that the paperwork had been an honest mistake. I let him finish. Then I said I would be happy to discuss it further with my own attorney present. He did not call again. My parents stopped calling to check in after that. What replaced it was a silence that had a specific texture to it, pressurized, like the air before a storm. Cody texted once. It said, "I hope you know what you're doing to this family." I did not respond. I want to tell you about the moment I almost backed down, because I think it is important to be honest about it. It was a Thursday about 6 weeks into the investigation, and I drove past the dry cleaning business on my way home from work. The lights were on inside. Through the front window, I could see my mother behind the counter helping a customer. She was smiling. She had her reading glasses on, the ones she always pushed up into her hair when she wasn't using them. She looked like just a person. A normal, regular person running a small business. I sat in my car for a long time. Then I thought about the certified letter. I thought about her rinsing the dish and saying, "We know." I thought about my father saying, "You'll recover," as if $63,000 in fraudulent debt was just a thing that happened to people and you moved on. I drove home. The formal hearing was a civil proceeding, not a criminal trial, which I want to be transparent about because I don't want this to sound more dramatic than it was. The bank was pursuing recovery of the fraudulent loan. The fraud examiner's findings had been forwarded to the district attorney's office for potential criminal referral, but that process moved slowly and was still pending. What the civil hearing determined was this: the loan was fraudulent. I was not liable. The debt was Cody's. The business accounts would be subject to a forensic audit going back 5 years. My father and Cody were present. My mother was not, which surprised me. When the hearing officer read the summary findings, my father's face did not change expression the way you might expect. He did not go pale or crumble. He just went very still, the way he used to when he was calculating something, and I realized I was watching a man understand that the calculation had come out wrong. Cody looked at me. I looked back. I did not look away first. Outside the building, in the flat gray light of a November afternoon, I sat on a bench and checked my phone. There was a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was my mother, texting from what I later learned was a new phone she had bought that morning. It said, "I'm sorry. I should have told him no." That was all. 8 words. I stared at it for a long time. I did not respond right away. I'm not sure I have fully responded even now, in the way that matters. Here is what I know. The forensic audit of the business accounts found enough irregularities that my father's accountant withdrew from representing him. The criminal referral for the loan fraud is ongoing. Cody had his wages garnished. The dry cleaning business is currently for sale. And me, I left the family business accounts in January. I had already been quietly building my own client list on the side. Small businesses, freelancers, people who needed clean, honest bookkeeping. I have 11 clients now. I work from my apartment, which I can afford, because my name is attached to exactly the debts I agreed to. I bought a plant. A fiddle leaf fig that everyone says is impossible to keep alive. Mine is doing fine. It took me a long time to stop feeling guilty. I want to be honest about that too. There is a particular kind of guilt that comes from within families, and it does not care whether you were right. It just sits there. It wakes you up at 3 a.m. and asks you whether you could have handled it differently, whether there was some version of this where everyone came out okay. I don't have a satisfying answer to that question. I just know that the version where I came out okay required me to stop pretending the floor was solid. My mother and I have exchanged a few texts since then. Short ones, nothing resolved. I don't know what that becomes, if anything. Cody has not contacted me. My father sent me a certified letter through his attorney demanding I return the business financial records I had improperly retained. Deborah reviewed it. The answer was no, because they were subpoenaed documents and I had retained nothing improperly. The attorney did not follow up. I keep the original bank letter in a folder in my filing cabinet, the one that started all of it. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because it is the most honest document anyone in that situation ever sent me. It did not pretend. It did not manage the story. It just said, here's what happened, and here is what you owe, and it had my name on it. The difference is, now my name is on things I actually chose. I am still working on what that means. But I'm working on it from an apartment I pay for myself, with 11 clients who trust me, and a fiddle leaf fig that everyone said would be dead by spring. It is almost spring now. The plant is fine. I've thought a lot about what actually went wrong in my family, not the fraud specifically, but the conditions that made it possible. Cody didn't forge my signature because he was a bad person in some simple, cartoonish way. He did it because for 29 years, every consequence he should have faced had been absorbed by someone else. My parents had been paying that particular bill for so long they didn't even recognize it as a debt anymore. They just called it love. That's the thing about patterns that go unexamined. They don't stay small. Cody's restaurant failed and my parents covered it. The food truck folded and they covered it again. Each time they did, they were teaching him something without meaning to, that the gap between his choices and their consequences was a space he could keep expanding. By the time he put my name on a federal loan document, he had genuinely convinced himself it wasn't that serious. That's not an excuse. It's a very specific kind of damage that looks, from the inside, like confidence. And I had been part of it too. Not the fraud. I want to be clear about that. But the silence? 4 years of running their books, seeing things I knew were wrong, and staying quiet because I told myself it wasn't my place, because I told myself it would cause more trouble than it was worth, because I loved them, and love has a way of making you negotiate with things you shouldn't. The audit log existed because I had built good systems, but I had never used those systems to actually ask hard questions. I had just maintained them and looked away. What I understand now is that protecting someone from the results of their own choices is not kindness. It looks like kindness. It feels like it, especially when you're the one doing it, especially when the person is your child or your brother, and you can see how much it will hurt them to face what they've done. But it is, in practice, alone. It accumulates interest. And at some point, the person who has been protecting everyone finds a certified letter in their mailbox with their own name on it. I don't think my father is a villain. I think he was a man who spent 30 years solving problems by making them smaller and quieter, and who raised a son who learned to do the same thing, and who raised a daughter who learned to stay quiet and keep the books clean. We were all doing exactly what we had been trained to do. The difference is that what I had been trained to do left a paper trail. The hardest part of all of it was not the hearing. It was not the calls from Mr. Farrow or the silence from my family or even Cody's text about what I was doing to them. The hardest part was sitting in my car outside that dry cleaning business and watching my mother through the window and feeling all of it, the love and the grief and the anger, all at once with no clean way to separate them. I drove home anyway, not because it was easy, because I had finally understood that the floor wasn't solid, and once you know that, you can't unknow it. You can only decide whether to keep standing there or find somewhere real to put your weight. My name is on things I chose now. That's what I kept coming back to in the months after. Every account, every client, every invoice, mine. Not inherited, not forged, not managed on someone else's behalf. The fiddle-leaf fig on my windowsill that everyone said would die is still alive. I water it when it needs it and leave it alone when it doesn't, and apparently that's enough. It turns out a lot of things work that way if you let them.